Good morning, and welcome to the Becoming Übermensch podcast. Something different today. I'm actually about to set off on a very long walk of 100 miles along the South Downs Way, which is in very close to the south coast of England, and I'm just outside Winchester Cathedral at the moment, and you can perhaps hear the organ music coming from inside. So this is the start. This is the westernmost point of the South Downs Way, and 100 miles away is Eastbourne, which is the easternmost point and the end of my journey. And I'll be setting off in a moment from this magnificent building, which is nearly 1,000 years old, and heading for Eastbourne along the South Downs Way through the South Downs National Park. Rather beautiful landscape. If you don't know it, it's the landscape that's depicted in, what's that name of that film with the rabbits in? Watership Down, that's right. So if you've read the book, or if you've seen the animated film, that's the South Downs right there. It's 100 miles and it's quite an undulating route, so a lot of hills, not very high, but often very steep. And it usually takes about a week. I did it once before, a few years ago, and I did it over 4 days, doing obviously about 25 miles a day. And I remember at the time thinking, this is a bit of a rush. I wish I'd given myself an extra day, time to stop and smell the roses. But having said that, I'm going to try and do it this time in 3 days. So that's going to be more of a challenge, and I don't know how I'm going to fare. And it will be a bit more difficult this time as well, because I am not staying in bed and breakfasts as I did last time, but I'm actually wild camping. So I've got all my gear on my back, which I weighed in this morning at 21 kilos, which is about 46 pounds. So quite a considerable amount of weight, about a quarter of my body weight actually. So yeah, I'm excited, a little bit nervous. Fortunately, I had a terrible night's sleep last night, only 3.5, 4 hours. Why is it that when you need sleep, it's so hard to come by sleep? Anyway, mustn't grumble. I had a couple of nettle scones for breakfast that my girlfriend Kelly baked last night. That's right, foraged nettles in scones, absolutely delicious. And I got up at 5, and it's now about 9 o'clock, so I've got the train over here. And yeah, I'm about to set off, so I'll be checking in later, talking a bit about Nietzsche, perhaps talking a bit more about myself as well, so you can understand your host of the Becoming Übermensch podcast. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm very happy to have you along on this journey. Best foot forward. I think I've been going about 6 hours and 20 minutes, and I've just done about 20 and a half miles. So it's getting on, it's about 10 to 4 now. I've just stopped for a cup of tea. Pretty exhausted. Feet are absolutely killing me, of course, but as long as I don't get any blisters, should be okay. Fingers crossed on that. I am worrying about it actually, because with blisters, it's game over. There's no way anyone is hobbling 100 miles. Yeah, my biggest challenge is the weight of my pack, the 21 kilos. It's absolutely monstrously heavy and is really dragging me down. It's not the pack's not bothering me so much. It's just my rate of progress isn't as good as I would like because of the extra weight. And what worries me about that is, strictly speaking, 100 miles over 3 days, I only need to do 33 miles today, so another 13 miles. But I really wanted to break off a big chunk today because this west end of the South Downs Way is a bit more forgiving than the easterly end, where the hills get a little bit more grinding and a bit more difficult. So it'd be really good to get a kind of head start on that. And I thought today, being fresh, I might be able to do it, but it's looking increasingly unlikely. Anyway, we'll see what happens. I guess one of the benefits tomorrow is that I will be starting earlier, because I started at 9 o'clock today due to my train journey. But tomorrow I can start at 7, probably 7 at the latest. So there'll be a couple of extra hours, but still, it's turning out to be pretty grueling. But then a man's reach should exceed his grasp, right? What doesn't kill you and all that. Anyway, I'm having my cup of tea and then I'll be soldiering on. The weather's been perfect. I mean, it's bright and sunny, but cool with a cool breeze. My only concern is that I might be getting more sunburnt than I imagine because of the cooling breeze. But I guess I'll find that out later this evening. Hopefully when I'm comfortably ensconced in my tent. But yeah, I will check in with you again at that time. All right, wish me luck. Bye. Oh, boots off and lying down. You could fry eggs on the soles of my feet. Not the most appetising eggs, granted. Bit of chilli sauce, perhaps. Yeah, it's been grueling. I've done about 27.5 miles, and it's now 9 o'clock at night. I found a spot to wild camp in a woods, kind of near Chichester, I think. It's fairly quiet, although there is a main road in the valley over the hill there, about half a mile away, so you might be able to hear the traffic. And also there's a plane going over. England, very populous. So yeah, I got here, set up the tent, I ate, made some ramen with some fresh vegetables and some tuna. That was very heartening. What's less heartening is that, of course, I haven't managed to do a third of the South Downs Way. 27 miles is 27% of 100 miles. Therefore, it's not looking good for me finishing this within my target timescale. So that's a bit disappointing. Unless I manage to pull out a really sensational day tomorrow, it looks like I'm not going to make it. And that performance tomorrow seems in doubt because, quite frankly, I am knackered, and I will be walking tomorrow for sure, but the likelihood that I'm going to have more vim and vigour than I had today seems like a remote possibility. So don't know, see what happens tomorrow. But I've actually got to I can't stay out for an extra day because I've actually got some work to do, working on some podcasts, actually some Nietzsche podcast material, which will be coming your way at some point. Some of the themes working on sex, power and beauty. Who's not interested in that stuff? And I'm sure all you listeners out there have got those three qualities in spades. Yeah, so I think probably what's going to happen is that I live in Brighton, which is about the 70 mile point, or close to the 70 mile point of the South Downs Way route. So I might peel off there and see how many miles that gets under my belt. Such is life. So a failure, I guess. But I kind of guess I'm kind of okay with that, because if you're not failing, you're not really pushing yourself. You've got to be working at your limit to improve, and that means that you will fail and fail often. So embrace failure, he says, rationalising his situation. And I suppose there's a pertinent question here, is like, why am I even doing this? That is a good question. I wish I had a good answer for it. I guess, like George Mallory, because it's there. I enjoy a challenge. I like the outdoors. And so I just thought, yeah, brainstorm. I'll give that a go. And I did it in 4 days last time, but then I wasn't carrying my house on my back. So 3 days in those circumstances was always a little bit beyond my grasp. But hey, no regrets. Yeah, and so what I'm going to do is it's coming up to 9:05. I've brushed my teeth. I think I'm going to turn in, go to sleep, see how I feel in the morning. I'll check in with you then. Perhaps discuss some Nietzsche stuff and perhaps talk a little bit about how this Becoming Übermensch project came about as well. Yeah, so sweet dreams to you, sweet dreams to me. See you in the AM. Good morning. It's a beautiful sunny morning, very chilly, very crisp, and in fact I slept better than I thought I was going to, but it was cold in the night and I had to get out of my bag and put on some extra layers. Excuse me. So yeah, but I got through the night and I slept in, really, because I normally wouldn't be waking up at 7 o'clock. But I don't feel bad about that because I was just grateful for the sleep, particularly in light of not getting a very good night's sleep yesterday. So all's good. And I've made some coffee, just drinking that now. Had a couple of flapjacks and getting my stuff together. I'm all packed up, ready for the next leg of this hike. I don't know how that's going to go. I'm already mentally resigned to not getting all the way to Eastbourne in 3 days. That just doesn't seem feasible at the moment. But in terms of fatigue, I'm not actually that bad. I haven't got any blisters that I can feel. My ankle hurts a little bit. These boots have been a little bit too tight around the ankle. They might be on their last legs. But all good otherwise, and the weather looks nice. So looking forward to today's leg. I did say I'd tell you the story of how this Becoming Übermensch podcast came about. And that starts a long time ago. When I was at university in my 20s, I came across Nietzsche and I read a few of his books, and I'll be perfectly honest, you may have had the same experience. I couldn't make head nor tail of them. And yet at the same time, there was something really compelling there, but I just didn't have the skills and the knowledge and the insight to be able to unpick it and interpret that philosophy into something that I could understand, and more importantly, something that I could use. So I like a bit of chin stroking as much as the next man, but I'm really interested in philosophy for life, and that's what Nietzsche offered, but it needed deciphering, and I didn't have the wherewithal to be able to do that. So following that exposure to his works, I started looking around for books on Nietzsche that would interpret his philosophy for me and explain how it might be practically applied and what the benefits of that might be. And there really wasn't any. I was very surprised. I mean, the internet came along quite soon after, and so it became easy to hunt down books and music and things like that, but I still couldn't find anything. The closest thing was a book by Robert Solomon called Living with Nietzsche, which I do recommend. It's an excellent book. Robert Solomon is one of the foremost Nietzsche scholars in the West. He's since deceased, but that book, Living with Nietzsche, is a really good read. But it still remains quite theoretical. It talks about kind of life skills, I suppose, what would be the best way to put this? Well, it talks about things like cultivating solitude, cultivating courage, things like that. But it doesn't actually give you any practical exercises. There's no practical program for implementing these things. And so at the end of the day, what it really constitutes is some advice. So a good book, not quite what I was looking for. And so the search continued. And then over the ensuing years, every few years I'd remember that I was interested in this project, and I'd get online and I'd scout around and see if there was any kind of new books that covered the topic as I'd like to see it presented. No dice. Anyway, fast forward to 2017, and that was a bit of a momentous year for me in some ways. My brother, who'd had a long-term respiratory illness, my younger brother, he died that year, in April of that year, and although I didn't see much of him, and we never really got on that well, being a bit too close in age, that hit me quite hard and, made me rethink my priorities a bit, and I started thinking about this Nietzsche project, and my thoughts were, well, if you can't find what you're looking for, you have to create it for yourself. Of course, I didn't feel even remotely equipped to do that, because I'd already had a crack at Nietzsche's works and found that they were just like too complicated and enigmatic for me. So that was going to be quite a challenge. Anyway, I decided to, interestingly enough, go on a big hike, which I do every few years. And this one was on the Isle of Corsica, which is in the Mediterranean Sea, a French island. And it's where Napoleon comes from, actually. An interesting connection there with Nietzsche, because Napoleon was one of Nietzsche's heroes, for want of a better word. That was an example of the higher man. So I flew out there and I was undertaking this hike called the Grand Route 20, which is a 100-mile hike through the mountains of Corsica. And Corsica really is just mountains. It's like a mountain range sticking out of the sea. Very rugged, very spectacular as well. And I flew out there and began the journey. And I took a Nietzsche book with me. I actually took the Nietzsche Reader by Hollingdale with me, which is another excellent little book, almost like a Nietzschean catechism. It's a collection of his aphorisms under different headings: will to power, religion, morality, what have you. Another recommended read. And it's not, it's a glorified pamphlet really, it's not too big. So I took that with me, and I spent my time hiking in the day and then in the evening trying to sort of get my head around that book. With a small degree of success. I can't say I made massive inroads initially. But then I had another life-changing event during the GR20, in that I'd gotten halfway through 50 miles to a place called Visavona, and then I got a message from my family saying that my grandma had a stroke and that she wasn't expected to live more than a few days. And so I had to make a choice then about abandoning the trip and trying to find my way back to the UK, which is what I did. And it wasn't easy because there isn't much of a public transportation system on Corsica, and I had to hitchhike, get the occasional bus, grab a taxi, pay a local, but they eventually got me to an airport on the coast, and at great expense because it was an unplanned flight. I flew back to the UK. My grandma was still alive when I got there, but she wasn't conscious, and so I went to my auntie's house, and me and the family spent the week sitting in vigil with my grandma, holding her hand and talking to her, and I don't think any of us slept for 4 or 5 days. And then of course in the end she died inevitably, but it felt like really important that I was there and that I could tell that trip and managed to get back and see her before she slipped away. So that was the second momentous event of 2017, and I think that probably confirmed me in my commitment to decipher Nietzsche for myself and come up with some practical programme to deploy his philosophy for life. And that's what this is. And so in the ensuing 8 years now, I've been studying Nietzsche's works and agonising over how they could be interpreted into a practical programme. And I'm quite proud actually of the success that I've made, because I am not an academic philosopher, but I've had to read all the secondary literature, the academic literature, in order to get to the point where I can, with authority and confidence, interpret Nietzsche's philosophy for you and be able to give you advice as regards how it is implemented in a real practical way. It got to the point after about 5 years that I could actually critique the secondary literature, the academic literature. So I in no way feel like I'm some kind of half-baked, second-rate Nietzsche scholar. I really think I've got it. And what a few years it's been, because I've had so many epiphanies, so many breakthroughs, things that have just absolutely blown my mind. And I really hope you get to experience that. It's like, oh my God, yes, this is, I can see this. I can see how the world works. Yeah, and it's that I'm trying to communicate through this programme. As it currently stands, I've started the Nietzsche podcast. I've been writing this book for 7 years. It's simply called Übermensch. And I've also written a couple of papers, sort of academic papers, sent those off and see if anything transpires from those. But this is, I guess my life has been turned over to this project. And so much so that 13 months ago, I actually quit my job. It was a well-paid job, satisfying, meaningful job, working in public health in behaviour change services. That's my background, which has really primed me well for this Nietzsche project, because I understand the scientific evidence base behind behaviour change, what works and what doesn't, because of course Nietzsche's programme involves behaviour change as well. It's all about change. So how do we make the changes that we want to make, and how do we make sure we're effective in making those changes and those changes are sustainable? But as I say, I quit that job because this project was demanding my full-time attention, and it was becoming clear to me that book would never get written if I didn't just give it all my attention, all my time. And so that's what I did, and that's what I'm doing, and I have no regrets about that. And honestly, it's changed my life, and I hope it does the same for you. Okay, so I'm going to finish my coffee here now, and then I'm going to get up and try and walk on these feet and see what the lie of the land is, and I'll check in with you later. But hopefully I can make some good ground towards Brighton, if not Eastbourne, and who knows, I might clock up a good 80 miles or something on this particular expedition, not to be sniffed at. Okay, let's go. Apologies if you can hear my pack squeaking. I'm on the road, on the trail. Beautiful day again, a bit cold and windy on the top of the hills, but otherwise absolutely glorious. I'm probably about 5 miles or 6 miles out from my last campsite, and thought I'd better say something about the South Downs, actually, for those people who are not familiar with it. South Downs is sort of a range of hills, about 100 miles long, that more or less follows the south coast of England along the English Channel. At this part, most easterly part of the South Downs Way, we're quite away from the sea, but it gets closer and closer as you get towards Eastbourne. And of course, Eastbourne is actually situated on the south coast of England. And it's a wonderful, beautiful environment. It's not really wilderness. It's got some scrub, but it's mainly agricultural land, and there's woodland and little villages, very cute little villages, nice country pubs serving local ales. So it's kind of a charming place. It's got an incredible history. All this chalk downland is peppered with the remains of hill forts left over from the Iron Age, and some of them, of course, were actually used by the Romans as well when they were here 2,000 years ago to build their own fortresses on. And then of course there's little churches everywhere, little Norman churches, and that's from the Norman invasion south of England in 1066. So again, almost 1,000 years there. So it's really rich with history, and it's a beautiful habitat, and the wildlife's amazing. As it's spring, I'm hearing lots of chiff-chaffs and greenfinches chirring, and also the yellowhammer, beautiful bird with a lovely call. It's hard to see actually, just because they tend to be very shy of humans, but if you do see them close up, a wonderful yellow head, vivid banana yellow on a little brown bird, quite striking, almost tropical. And there's lots of red kites as well patrolling around. It's a magnificent large bird of prey, russet red in colour with a grey head, and they were extinct in England up until last couple of decades, and they've been successfully reintroduced, so that's really encouraging. And the Downs is a wonderful rolling countryside, a bit like, if you imagine a blanket that's all crumpled up, and you've got the peaks and the troughs. It's very much like that undulating landscape, and it's quite demanding on the walker, not because of the height of the hills so much, but because of their frequency. So you're up and down, and some of the hills undulate quite violently, some of the ranges of hills, and that is quite exhausting. There can be a real grind, extremely steep. But yeah, wonderful walking terrain. And of course I don't begrudge a hill, because no hills means no views. So yeah, it's wonderful. I'm often asked to recommend a first book of Nietzsche's for people new to the philosopher. And I have mentioned previously how impenetrable his books can be for the noob. They certainly were for me anyway. And there are so many varying interpretations of Nietzsche's philosophy out there. He can be, as an author, vague, oblique. enigmatic, it's often quite poetic, and even esoteric, I would say, because he doesn't go out of his way to make sure everyone can understand him. Quite the opposite. He's interested in an elite coterie of free spirits, as he calls them. So that can make him difficult to read, but strangely, at the same time, he's quite easy to read. I guess he's easy to read, but sometimes a bit difficult to understand. And in fact, his prose is famously highly entertaining, even laugh out loud funny at times, which is unusual for a philosopher. For myself, honestly, I had to read all of his published works to really understand any of them fully. There are consistent themes across his books, which of course develop over time, but with a comprehensive overview of his work, you can pick out the essential tenets of his thought without too much difficulty. Let me read you something about that from my phone, actually. And these are my thoughts on understanding Nietzsche. Okay, so this is me. My own method of interpreting him has been to carefully study the entire body of work in the round and cut through the obfuscations of style and literary mystification by a process of triangulation. It can be hard to discern what Nietzsche is trying to communicate to you when analysing him sentence by sentence and word by word, but from the bird's eye perspective, the prevailing currents in Nietzsche's writings are absolutely unmistakable. Again, we see how the typically male, quantitative, microscopic view needs to be supplemented by a wider, more non-specific, more thematic, more feminine contextual appreciation. Unquote. And that's me. That's a reference to those archetypal feminine qualities I mentioned in episode 6 there, talking about the yin and the yang, I guess, of Nietzsche's writings. If you consider the male as the point and the female as the circle, well, then you've got kind of analysis and sort of broader thematic interpretation. It's actually surprising just how many correspondences with Taoism there are in Nietzsche's work. Anyway, don't want to digress. In terms of recommending a book, a first book for Nietzsche, well, what I wouldn't recommend is Thus Spoke Zarathustra. That's an incredibly complicated text, and it's really only for the initiated. Twilight of the Idols is often suggested as a first book because it's not particularly big and it covers lots of Nietzsche's main themes. But actually, I'd recommend starting with a biography of Nietzsche, and a philosophical biography in particular, because that helps you, well, those books tend to talk about the development of his philosophy and his thought, work by work, and that's really, really useful. And also, with a biography, the truth is you can't really separate the man from his work, and the tumultuous times that Nietzsche lived in are really germane to his philosophy as well. Consider that he lived hot on the heels of the Enlightenment, and the theories of Darwin were gaining popular currency, creating quite a revolution actually across the Western world. And in terms of technology, well, the Industrial Revolution was underway and the telegraph had been invented and rail networks. So this is all really relevant stuff. As well as that, Germany was not yet a nation. It was lots of principalities, and Nietzsche lived in one called Lower Saxony. So lots of geopolitical machinations that are relevant to Nietzsche's thought too. In terms of particular biographies, there's loads of good ones. I would recommend Julian Jung's biography. It's a big one, it's 600 pages, but it's such a page turner. I really enjoyed that book. Didn't want it to end, and I found it unputdownable, as they say. So I certainly recommend that one. So I've been going for some hours now, and in fact Nietzsche was a big walker. He would walk 6 to 8 hours per day, and he wasn't the first philosopher who found walking conducive to philosophical thought. There were the Peripatetics in ancient Greece, of course. So that's Aristotle and his school, the Lyceum. And apparently they would discuss philosophy whilst walking around the gardens of the Lyceum. So there's a connection there between thinking and walking. And in fact, there's an old Roman adage, solvitur perambulando, which means it is solved by walking. And this is obviously metaphorical, but it's also, I think, an adage that advocates taking action rather than overthinking something. Sometimes you figure something out by doing it rather than just thinking about it. Anyway, I've been going for a number of hours now, and it's really starting to hurt. Okay. Well, folks, I'm done. I'm 40 miles in and I am in serious discomfort. Finally, the blisters have arrived. I've got a big one on the ball of my right foot. And in fact, my feet feel like they've been flayed. So here at 41 miles, unfortunately, I'm folding. So that's an inglorious achievement of 41%. Seems I bit off a bit more than I could chew this time. So I'm going to hobble to the nearest village and get a ride to a rail station. So the verdict can only be fail. Such is life.
The Becoming Übermensch project is a new and tender green shoot striving towards the light. If it's going to thrive, it needs the sunshine and gentle rain of your support. If you find this material of value, help us to help you by doing a few simple things. Hit follow so you don't miss the next episode. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook and X. Search Becoming Übermensch, all one word. Drop us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. And if you know people who'd get something from this podcast, please do share it with them. Your support makes all the difference and can help this project survive and flourish.
Hi, back home again. So I wasn't even close that time. 41 miles of a 100-mile route. The last time I did it, about 5 years ago, I found it grueling doing the 25 miles a day, plus change because I had to get on and off the trail to my accommodation. And that was with just a day pack, with a sandwich, bottle of water and a waterproof. The weight I took this time was really substantial. So even though I found it challenging last time, I tried to speed up whilst burdening myself with even more equipment. So bad planning there, really. I needed to determine a balance between more weight and more speed, not both at the same time. So if I did it again, I would say 15 miles per day is a robust challenge if you're carrying your wild camping equipment, pushing it to 20 miles a day if you really want to be stretched. So there's a learning experience for me. But as you may have heard me say already in this series, failure is positive. If you aren't failing, you aren't pushing your limits. The road to success is the road of repeated failure. So I welcome the experience of failure. Recall all we discussed about fulfillment being premised on suffering. That will-to-power dynamic of striving to overcome resistance. And the greater the resistance, the greater the joy in success. But of course, the greater the resistance, the greater the probability of failure. Make a friend of failure, because if you want to succeed at anything truly worthwhile, you will be spending a lot of time in its company. That's it for this week. Soon we're going to be working with some evidence-based techniques for making life changes, which is the real business end of this podcast. But before then, we need to take a look at the body. The body for Nietzsche is the real you. Not your mind, not your personality, certainly not your soul, if you believe in such things. So I hope you'll join me for that next time. And in the meantime, there's a taster being released at the same time as this episode, covering the power of habit for creating positive behaviour change. Be sure and check that out if you haven't already. And until next time, live dangerously.